Awesome. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to an episode of a podcast on my own personal YouTube channel. This week I have on Louis Liu. Louis, welcome.
Happy to be here again, Joe. Thank you for inviting.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And the reason that I wanted to invite you back on to do this and I wanted to get your thoughts is because I recently published a report through Unchained and Strive about how to reprice the economy in Bitcoin. So revaluing financial assets today, but measured in Bitcoin instead of dollars. So creating a Bitcoin based discounted cash flow model instead of a dollar based discounted cash flow model. And the whole idea actually came from something that we did at Mises Capital 4 or 5 years ago, where we created like a fake fictional company and modeled the value in dollars and then modeled the value in Bitcoin. And basically the high level thesis was if you view assets in dollar terms, they look like an attractive investment today. But if you view assets in Bitcoin terms, Bitcoin looks like a better way to store wealth into the future, and a lot of assets are overvalued. So I'm just curious, if you have any thoughts on like how you think about valuing assets in dollar terms or Bitcoin terms, and if you have any thoughts on the report that we published at Strive or old work or old research that we published at Mises Capital.
Yeah, first of all, that is a great report, on how to value companies. And the example that you pick, which is Apple, was one of the Magnificent Seven. I think model after that company is a great choice. I think overall you lay out the, bearish, conservative, and bullish scenario. I think that's a good, comparison to look at for every corporation on the earth. Should dive into how do they really value their business, compared to Bitcoin. And I think the ultimate thesis that you try to lay out, which is mirroring the research that you did in the past at the Mises with me, is the fact that most business in the world doesn't grow as fast as Bitcoin, especially if you're in the traditional business. Your growth rate is even less, right? Apple has a good growth rate, but if you're in traditional, textile business or retail business, your growth rate is roughly around 10%, and 10% is a bullish case, right? Normally you grow at like single digit percentage, and you don't even beat the S&P 500. Rather you compare to Bitcoin is even higher, right? So I think bring up Apple. Apple is pretty high growth company. It's a technological company. Has a great product, growing at pretty high growth rate, 20%, 30%. In the past, it's even higher, right? So the growth rate can actually exceed the the asset inflation by the money printing, which you mentioned, how to adjust the asset evaluation after M2, which is the monetary expansion by the central bank. Ultimately, I think most corporations that are facing right now, small business, private business, or public company, is that the growth rate is shrinking. And if you're not running the tech company, you don't have the high growth rate. And the solution for that is actually adopt Bitcoin on the balance sheet side. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very well said, and I completely agree. And so, very related to this concept, it's like you and I both think of Bitcoin as a pristine asset that is growing at a very high growth rate and is a fantastic long-term store of value. Do you also view it as a hurdle rate? That's what Matt Cole has talked about, or also as a benchmark. It's like if your company is not outperforming Bitcoin, not only should you hold Bitcoin, but you should recognize that you're underperforming your benchmark. Like you should obviously just be holding Bitcoin. Or do you agree with that sentiment, or how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think we talked about it back then, right? And in 2020, 2021, we did something that how do you denominate an asset in Bitcoin? So at that point, I think we already knew Bitcoin is the new hurdle rate. And it makes sense because fiat money is always expanding. And you can really outperform that if you don't have something like Bitcoin, which is fixed supply on the other side. So it becomes like the hurdle rate for asset management. I just say, the current traditional way of valuing asset is probably compared to treasury, US treasury, right, which is right now roughly 4.5% interest rate. And that's the hurdle rate that you're going to bid because that's a risk free, right? Because you can just put your asset into treasury and make about 4.5% per year. But after tax, roughly just like 3% after all the cost deduction. So that's the traditional hurdle rate. And the new hurdle rate that we've been discussed in the past, even right now, that been brought up by more and more people who understand Bitcoin, and now they view Bitcoin as the new hurdle rate because it's the new money of the 21st century, right? So I think that all the asset management, all the financial institution are starting to see, actually Bitcoin is the real hurdle rate that you're going to beat because it's the actual money that a company or individual or sovereign is going to acquire. And I think, and most, sadly, most corporation today, individual today don't recognize that. You only have certain understanding of Bitcoin principle, Bitcoin technological advancement. That's the moment you start realize that it is the hurdle rate. And Bitcoin is growing like, maybe 20, 30%, maybe higher, 40% ARR. And that's a very significant growth rate, right? If you're investing in treasury bond or even S&P 500, you cannot even beat that, right? And most company doesn't grow at 40% ARR. If you really wanted to catch up, right, the only thing that you individual can rationally do is buy some Bitcoin. And if you really love your business, maybe keep some of the business and put some of the cash balance sheet into Bitcoin so you can keep up the growth. Otherwise, like in 10 years, 20 years, the valuation of that business is going to cut in half or even more. So if you want to keep up, the rate of growth. And Bitcoin is kind of like the mirror to the money printing problem, right? So if money expand faster, Bitcoin price expand faster. And that just kind of like dynamic between, you have infinite supply and the fixed supply, right? That will be always on the in the market. And Bitcoin is kind of like a mirroring the monetary expansion of the fiat, Ponzi scheme. So as long as the fiat Ponzi scheme keep expanding, Bitcoin price keep expanding, and the growth of that expansion will be recognized as a hurdle rate of the future. Mm-hmm. Even today, right? If you can keep up, like 5 years ago you adopt Bitcoin, right now you kind of like beating all the benchmark, and I think that's the right investment to do. Otherwise, you just you are being diluted by the monetary expansion.
Yeah, you used a phrase that I really liked earlier there, where you referred to Bitcoin as the actual money, which I really liked, because it's like we use phrases like the hurdle rate or using Bitcoin as a benchmark, but it's basically what we're saying is like, if you hold one Bitcoin today or you hold 100 Bitcoin today, you don't want to turn your one Bitcoin into 0.9 Bitcoin, just like you wouldn't want to turn $1 into 90 cents. That's illogical. It's if Bitcoin is the best money, then over the long run, you don't want to invest your money and lose it. You want to invest your money and make more money. It's the entire point of investing. So I thought that was a interesting way of framing what you talked about there. Another point that I want to make, or that you brought up as well, is like, we've been talking about this idea of Bitcoin as a hurdle rate since 2020, 4 or 5 years ago at this point. Are you surprised that, the adoption of this idea is still so low, so compared to what it could be, right? I mean, it's been 5 years. Price of Bitcoin has gone up multiples from what it was back then. And still, very few people recognize that Bitcoin is the best form of long-term savings technology, the best form of money, and very few people are using it as a benchmark. Are you surprised about that?
No, I'm not. There always a friction of adoption, and you're going to start with the education system, right? You're going to teach you're going to teach Bitcoin as a hurdle rate or a benchmark in business school or in college when you study finance or economy or portfolio management, but they are not teaching that, so I'm not surprised. But I really do think the things has accelerated a little bit with like Strive launching the investment banking business, merged with the public company. I think that's a great deal because now you have like some sort of like activist fund out there try to push this narrative or push this idea to a lot of like private business or public business. And I don't think this just, in the US, I think the business itself can expand globally. They can advise, companies in Asia or companies in Europe about, you should adopt Bitcoin in some way, right? On the balance sheet, or into your products. So yeah, I think it's encouragement. There's a lot of development. And also, the strategy, used to be micro strategy, have paved a pretty good path because they have demonstrated that, putting Bitcoin on your balance sheet and leverage it, can create extraordinary, shareholder value. I think that kind of like set the example for more companies adopt it. So that's why we see, there's a lot of like companies going public via merge or SPAC, or even the existing public company has been, copying the strategy Bitcoin playbook. And that's not only in the US, right? It's like happening globally. I think that's an encouragement. I think with more company adopt Bitcoin on the balance sheet side, as treasury, more and more companies going to see the benefits because when your close friend or your close neighborhood starting to buy Bitcoin, his company starting to buy Bitcoin, and you see the company shareholder are happy, the valuation go up, everybody, at his company is making money. Now you start to think, should I do the same thing? Right. I think there's mimetic effect of that, right? People try to mimic each other because it's a good, investment, and it kind of like benefiting each other. Like, strategy has a lot of Bitcoin on balance sheet side. When the next company adopt Bitcoin treasury, with a huge, investment, that benefits the entire, Bitcoin holding, right? It also benefits like, everyone that holds Bitcoin, even you are in some place like Africa or not really connected to the international financial system. It doesn't matter, right? As long as you're connected to Bitcoin, as long as you hold Bitcoin, you're going to benefit by someone, in the US or in Europe buying a large amount of Bitcoin, pushing the price up, pushing the supply down. And we all benefit, from this type of, mimetic, development. So I think we don't have to be, discouraged because most companies haven't do that. I think we should be optimistic because things are definitely accelerating, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you brought up something really interesting there where you were talking about basically Bitcoin being such a global phenomenon where so many people around the world are, converging on Bitcoin and using Bitcoin as savings technology. And it kind of reminds me of how we connected originally, like over the internet, me being in the United States, you being in Taiwan, having completely different backgrounds, completely different, cultures. Yet despite all of that, we've both converged on the same idea that Bitcoin is the best form of money or is the best savings technology. And this is not just us; it's happening all over the world. It's Metaplanet in Japan, Gridless in Africa, Ricardo Salinas in Mexico. It's like so many people around the world in different geographic locations are converging on this idea at the same time without really necessarily communicating directly with each other. Like, does that make you like very bullish and optimistic about the future? Or how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think we all discover Bitcoin on the internet, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter of your physical location. Um, so internet is a very powerful thing, right? It kind of like um, di- diverse or making the information infinitely widespread faster, So people in, you know, uh, very poor country, they still can access to, not Bitcoin's fundamental knowledge via, internet. So I think that's a very powerful thing. And, and the guy in the poor country can pick up a phone, which also connect to the internet, can actually start using Bitcoin wallets, right? I think if you are smart enough, you can figure out a way to buy some Bitcoin and start using it, or even develop some unique software or working on the Bitcoin open source project. So ultimately, Bitcoin is global network. So everyone who has the right knowledge and internet access, and devices, can access to the Bitcoin network. Yeah, that's very very powerful thing. Is That's the power of the decentralization, and Bitcoin is permissionless, right? So you don't have to be like uh, get authority to recognize you, right? You just need to use the device, use the internet, and then you can use the Bitcoin. And there's no banking system, there's no government system to stop you from doing that, right? So it's just infinite scaling faster, um, and really, there are 7 billion people on the earth, and I think Bitcoin's penetration is going to be very, very fast. And I think by the end of like maybe 2045, something like that, I think they will be like maybe 2 billion, 3 billion people will be using Bitcoin with or without noticing it, right? Uh, and I think that's a good thing about Bitcoin's decentralization and permissionless. And there are also like, actors that in the Bitcoin space try to push this locally. And I think that's also a powerful narrative that Bitcoin can bring. It's the local adoption. So you now you have like Bitcoin corporation, Bitcoin treasury company in every country basically. In US you have strategy pushing the frontier, helping educating companies to adopt Bitcoin, and that accelerated Bitcoin growth. And then you have like Metaplanet in Japan, also trying to push locally, educating and educating their shareholder, educating their investor, institutions, financial institution, to understand Bitcoin. You need to start somewhere, right? And also the individual, right? Individual can also push locally. You can start a seminar, you can start online education, in different language. to push Bitcoin out there, or start Bitcoin community that's free of charge. Everybody can join, and you can teach them in the local language. So Bitcoin has a very unique kind of like a widespread characteristic. It's like a virus. Once it's get out there, once it's in your mind, and you start to thinking that how should I increase the awareness? How should I helping people to adopt it? How should I spread this good news? And I think that's a very powerful thing. Not only institutions play a role here, but institutions are increasingly playing a role here, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing because that just speed up the entire adoption speed. And you also have individual, right, to speed up the process. And now, you got governments, right? U.S. governments, El Salvador, they are also pushing on the national adoption, right? I think on different level, you always see people advocating for Bitcoin, and I think that's a very unique characteristic of an asset class, which I don't see that in any asset class, but you can see that in technology, right? Like internet, like maybe like AI, you can see that, but on the technology plus asset, which is what Bitcoin is, you rarely see that, right? As a play, you don't talk to people about S&P 500, right? Individual, we don't have a seminar advocating for S&P 500 or community building out for S&P 500. But you do have that for Bitcoin, so it is a worldwide phenomenon globally. And ultimately, if you push for S&P 500, it's like you are pushing for US denominated asset. It's not like, it's still tied to a nation, right? And you're helping US, right? But if you're pushing Bitcoin, it's kind of like non-sovereign asset. Everybody can use, right? Which is a different thing. And give you that when you push it, you kind of feel like this is a virtuous thing, right? And this is a moral thing to get this Bitcoin out there and having more people to know about it.
Yeah, those are fantastic points. I do want to ask you about Bitcoin treasury companies. Because I think that's been a very interesting phenomenon recently, for sure. And one like analogy or frame of reference that I've been tying this to is I feel like during the 2017 bubble, people a lot of speculators rushed into altcoins, and then during the 2021 bubble, a lot of speculators rushed into NFTs or meme stocks, even like GameStop or Bird Scooter or Zoom during that time. And a lot of the speculation didn't end up in Bitcoin. Whereas if this cycle, the altcoins of this cycle are the Bitcoin treasury companies, and if those companies raise money, issue equity, what do they do with that money? Well, they actually buy more Bitcoin with it. So do you see that like this cycle might be a little bit different from previous cycles because of that? Because if the new altcoins are the Bitcoin treasury companies, well, that capital is going to funnel into Bitcoin eventually. Does that change things in your mind, or is it not that much of a difference?
Well, yeah. So I think the comparison to altcoin, it's not the whole spectrum of the thing, right? You have to get into the details. I think Bitcoin treasury company is a new phenomenon that has been developed, since strategy adopted Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So that's 5 years ago. So it's not long ago. So I think this new development is very positive in my view, because you have a set of like players trying to influence the capital markets, also influence the shareholder influence even on their peers, competitors, which are corporations, right? They are set up entities that are doing business with each other or with the markets. So it's a powerful force. And I think we should be glad to see them stepping in, getting, Bitcoin to next frontier. And that next frontier is actually what you see here right now is there are many copycats of my strategy right now. And the reason for that had to happen is, this is a successful playbook, right? Strategy has increased the market cap by 100x, right? And why won't you do it, right? If you can increase your shareholder value by 100x by just buying Bitcoin. So in that spectrum, in that view, I think, Bitcoin treasury company is not altcoin and is definitely benefiting the entire globe of the Bitcoin hodlers. Mm-hmm. And you want that to happen because they are trying to, getting the capital to flow into Bitcoin, not into other cryptos, right? Mm-hmm. Like maybe like Ethereum, like Solana, right? So they are basically a friend of Bitcoin, not an enemy. But when you get into more details, like each company is different, right? They have different risks, management is different, capital market is different. Some, you can be in the US capital market, or you can be in the Japan capital market. So each create a different dynamic, each create a different risk. And so far we haven't seen a bear cycle, which is like, in 2023, when you see FTX collapse or, BlockFi collapse, Signature Bank, Silvergate Bank collapse. That was a scary time. That was a bear market, right? Now we are in the bull market, and most Bitcoin treasury company are developed in the bull market, right? Only one Bitcoin treasury company actually survived the bear market, which is Strategy. And that incident kind of like give more credibility to Strategy's management team and the capital structure that Strategy is running. Whereas others is more speculation that how much Bitcoin per share they can grow, how much money they can borrow to buy Bitcoin, and how much the stock can go up, right, relative to the strategy. So it's much on the riskier side of the curve. And I don't know what will happen during the bear market. Will those companies still survive? Or will their company get into the distress, moment? I think everything is on the table. But definitely, on the positive side, this is a great development, right? You are funneling the fiat world, fiat capital market into the Bitcoin market. You eventually that will happen, right? It is not like, you can stop it, right? And Bitcoin is permissionless. You cannot stop corporation to buy Bitcoin. They can do whatever they want with the Bitcoin. And I think this kind of like development can continue for a while, because I don't think it's saturated yet. I think it just it's just at the beginning. Strategy started 5 years ago, and 5 years later, people started copying it. It makes sense, and they actually do boost Bitcoin development, right? It did boost Bitcoin services, which much strong capital on the balance sheet side, because they started with buying Bitcoin. So it's an entire different cohort of Bitcoin company, because when I invested in Bitcoin startup, in back in days is they don't have much Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Very few Bitcoin startups start with um, Bitcoin on the balance sheet. They just spend the money the investor invested on the services, on products, on marketing, on the team. And they don't really go out there and just buy Bitcoin and sit there, right?
Yeah.
But now you do see there's cohort of public companies doing the exact opposite. Like they don't do business, they don't build products, but they buy Bitcoin. Um, you know, and I think you have the two dynamics that's going on. Like should the Bitcoin startup with business buy more Bitcoin, or should the Bitcoin treasury company with a lot of Bitcoin start doing Bitcoin business, right? But it is a positive cycle for Bitcoin, because you buy more Bitcoin, that means less Bitcoin on the market, Bitcoin price go up, and then what will you do with the Bitcoin, right? You probably end up building some products, try to leverage that stacks, right? So yeah, it's a good thing for Bitcoin network, and if you funnel that money into altcoin or shitcoins out there, you just see the money just wipe out, right?
Yep.
And it might go back to Bitcoin, but it's like, it's different. Like every money that those Bitcoin treasury are are doing is to buy Bitcoin and eventually build a Bitcoin business, versus like if you give money to a altcoin project, they use that to pump their backs,
Yeah.
right? That's the difference. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess if you buy an altcoin, your money doesn't go into Bitcoin. Your money goes into a yacht for whoever sold you the altcoin, most likely. Unfortunately. But another thing that's interesting, I think, about strategy is like you said, they've been around for 5 years, which you know is not in the grand scheme of things that long, but it's also long in the sense that it's been 5 years. Their market cap has done 100x. Their stock is up like 2,000, 3,000 something percent, something crazy. They've literally been advertising their playbook for practically 5 straight years. Like they're encouraging other businesses to copy their exact strategy. Finally, other businesses are starting to do that. But it took other businesses a long time to do that. And it's just like, you don't see like NVIDIA, publishing their exact playbook of how they're going to design and create GPUs, or you don't see Coca-Cola publishing their formula, on the internet for everyone to see. It's like, this is like a very interesting experiment that's going down. It's like it's not competition, it's co-opetition between these Bitcoin treasury companies. Like each one kind of benefits each other from the other one existing. And so it's kind of fascinating to think about it like that.
Well, I have different view on this.
Okay.
I think strategy knows they have upper hand. They are the king on the hill. So they wanted to publish the playbook so that everybody can try to copy it, mimic it. To have the same strategy to be on the top of the hill. But the top of the hill is already being occupied. So they are already checkmate the entire game. And that's, that's like, it's not like unfortunate, but it's fortunate to have that, because you need a leader in the space, right? And people who don't do that, companies that don't do what strategy is doing, like you say, they are not going to keep up with the hurdle rate. So they have been, cornered most company out there. If they're not Max 7 with high growth rate, they pretty much the only way they can get that growth is from Bitcoin. So strategy published that playbook is good for all the corporation. But the reason they published that, on the competition side, is they are trying to get everybody on board, and they can stay, on the top of the hill, And eventually, when everybody joins, price go up, strategy benefits it. They have larger, flow of capital to buy more Bitcoin. So it's strategically thought out. And most businesses have no other choice to have some Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And most businesses can be very toxic, right? They can say that, strategy already win the game. Why should I join the game? But you have that kind of mindset. It's like, saying that how are we going to beat the hurdle rate, right? Buying Bitcoin is the simplest way. If you don't want to do that, what else you want to do? You can develop an AI company, right? You can develop the next generation, I don't know, self-driving car, right? You can go on even riskier curve to have that growth. But most companies didn't make it, right? They don't make it because it's just hard to have that kind of growth at 40%. Also have the risk-adjusted return, right? Only Bitcoin has that kind of characteristic. So buying Bitcoin is the simplest way to keep up. And many entrepreneurs have their ego. They when they see strategy had that much Bitcoin, they give up. They try to do other stuff, which strategically that could make sense. But if you don't want your business to die because of someone else's ego, you better just start buying some Bitcoin and hope that your company survive. And the world is pretty much very dynamic, right? You don't know what's the next technology that can come up and replace your business.
Yep.
And I don't think there's any technology out there right now can replace Bitcoin. So whatever you do, you have to think about like what's the competitive edge I have? How do I actually achieve the growth and maintain the growth, maintain the position, right? And that's a very hard thing to do. Only few entrepreneurs can achieve that. So I think, strategy figured out a way and they dominated the market with really, great execution. And now that company just waking up say that, yeah, we cannot really, grow that fast. Why not just buy some Bitcoin? And that kind of pushed the market cap of strategy and Bitcoin. And it's kind of like, positive, feedback loop. And to give the playbook to all the corporations around the world is the right play, right? Because most people don't know how to do this. And it's not like, this is a secret, right? This is not, something that you say, right? Coca-Cola formula. This is like pretty open source. But there's still like some secret to that, right? Because when you are at the board trying to raise capital, what details they went through, how do they manage and raise that kind of capital? It's all secret. Because now like you have like dozens of US company in the market try to raise from the same capital pool.
Yeah.
So the connection become very very critical. Like who are you in good relationship with this bank? And are you in, is an investors going to trust you with the capital? All that kind of stuff. They are start to compete on the same capital pool. And I think strategy has a strong edge because they are the first mover. They probably have some secrets. Who knows? Like they being the first one to do it, they must be strong, connections within the, banks or, and they've been public for 30 years, right? So it's a long run public company. So they probably know more on, how to execute the strategy than most companies out there, which is unique, right? And the new one, the copycats on the US market, even though they want to buy Bitcoin, they probably don't have the access to the same capital pool. Maybe, maybe not, right? Maybe they don't have the access that Sarah has with his experience in the capital market for so long, right? And the new one might struggle to raise new capital. We will see. But the playbook is out there, but it's not like everybody can copy it. It still needs some skill set. And that's why, what you see right now, there are many different kinds of Bitcoin treasury playbook. Some focus on investment banking like Strive is doing, and some focus on, their own core business like healthcare, or mining, or what else? Real estate business, right? So it's getting more diversified. Yeah, but ultimately, it just strengthened the whole narrative that strategy is building. And I don't see, that can get surpassed in any in form. The only way that strategy cannot maintain the leader is, they eventually blow up, because it's a human managed business. It's not Bitcoin. So there's a risk of it blowing up if they don't take care of it. But that's in the long run. Like, who knows what will happen. So that's a risk. And I think that's a risk that investors are paying for to outperform Bitcoin. And you have to justify that risk, right? So it's not an easy thing to do. I think you have to think more on, what's your investing appetite, right? Do you want more risk? Do you want less risk? Bitcoin is already a 70% vol asset. Do you want 100% vol asset be on top? That's the thing. And the new companies that are out there copying MicroStrategy, are even riskier, right? The stock can go up like 20% and go down 20% in a day. So, yeah.
Yeah, those are definitely some great points. I agree. Like, I don't think another company is going to be able to surpass MicroStrategy in terms of how much Bitcoin that they hold in their balance sheet. I think that'll be difficult. And so far, right, like their MNAV multiple has held up very well despite a lot of other quote unquote competitors trying to copy their strategy. They haven't been successful to drop their NAV multiple, which has been interesting too. I do want to ask you about like this cycle as well. A lot of people, including myself, compare Bitcoin to gold, right? It's digital version of gold, and gold over the last year or so has done exceptionally well. I think it's up like 30 something percent, maybe more. And I think now Bitcoin gold parity, where if they were just equal in market cap, Bitcoin would be about $1 million per Bitcoin. Do you see that that's on the table for this cycle, or is that still further down the line? Like, how do you think, Bitcoin competing with gold or Bitcoin just matching gold? How do you see that playing out over the next, this cycle or the following cycles?
Yeah. I think we've always been talking about this, like when is Bitcoin going to surpass gold? I think, you see the asset ranking right now. Like, I think Bitcoin went from number 7 or something to now like only 3 public companies behind, right? I think one is like Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia. Those 3, right? Bitcoin is number 4 in the asset market cap, and number 1 is obviously gold, right? So there's only 4 competitors out there, and 3 of them are companies.
Yeah.
So I think this cycle to just be more, realistic. Is that I think Bitcoin just surpassed the companies first, right? The largest company I think is Microsoft. Get that over with. So we can have like 2 largest assets on the earth are not companies,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have gold, Bitcoin, rest companies. Let's start with that,
Mm-hmm.
and then we could go up higher, and eventually surpass gold to become number one assets Bitcoin, number two is gold, and the rest companies. I think Bitcoin surpassing the largest company in the world, it will be very interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that will create kind of like reflexivity to keep the price, pumping. Because now like everybody see the truth is that, yeah, Bitcoin as the asset class is way better than all the tech companies combined, right? It's better than Amazon. It's better than Apple. It's better than Microsoft. It's better than Nvidia, right? There's no management risk. There's no human risk involved, right? Like gold, right? Gold is, a commodity, right? And Bitcoin is a commodity as well. There's no human tied to it. It's only machine, right? Um, so if the entire, institution or financial market saw that happening, they're going to melt brains because
Yeah.
in the past, they think Bitcoin is just a Ponzi scheme, and now they are second largest asset in the world. And when you are second largest asset with the momentum, I think it's just not long ago. Not you won't take much time to surpass the number one. And gold in many cases just too old. It's not fit right in the current or the future monetary system, right? It's a commodity that have been used by the human being for the last 5,000 years, but the technology evolution can't stop, right? With Bitcoin, you have the new paradigm. So, I mean, exciting to see is, yeah, eventually we Bitcoin at the second place. Uh, all the financial institutions are going to support it or invest in it and push it to the number one. Uh, And I think I don't know what time is that, but I think definitely like in 20 years, this is something that will happen, and maybe not 20 years, maybe 10 years, but 20 years in like conservative case. But I don't see it this cycle though. Like this cycle, I mean, if you mean this cycle is like 1 year, 2 year, unlikely, but 1 year, 2 years surpassing the largest company in the world is totally possible.
Mm-hmm.
And we go from there. Um, and I think it will be interesting to see, right? Because that kind of like rings a bell for a lot of like governments, banks, financial institution, not only in the US, but like in a more conservative place, maybe in Europe, um, or place that have strict financial regulation might start to treat it well, right? Because you can no longer really ignore it. Now you can say like, this is number fourth largest asset in the world. You can kind of like ignore it. But when you surpass the largest company in the world, your bankers, your advisor are not advising you to buy this, are just like idiots, right? So I think that's a maybe that's an environment that we are going into the cycle. People try to advise you to buy Max 7, but I think it will change. I think people will try to advise you to buy Bitcoin because it has a growth story. It has a narrative. Also have the characteristic of big tech, right? That would be the number one option, I think, for a lot of investment advisors who are pushing it, or bankers. Not Go, because Go are just pretty boring, right? Um, so I do see that happen in this cycle, like Bitcoin become the second largest asset in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, you made a really good point about it, watching Bitcoin potentially surpass the largest company in the world, largest publicly traded company in the world. And I completely agree. That would absolutely melt people's brains. It reminds me of just Bitcoin's history where, you'll have expert commentators or expert financial analysts say, oh, Bitcoin died at $200 Bitcoin. Oh, Bitcoin died at $3,000 Bitcoin. Oh, Bitcoin died at $20,000 Bitcoin. And every time it doesn't die, it keeps getting stronger. And it's like, once it passes the largest company in the world, like that's going to be pretty mind boggling to so many people. The people will not, it's like, you're really like, maybe you should start second guessing like your position if you really think that this is a tulip bubble. I don't think tulips ever were the number two asset in the entire world.
Yeah. I'll be. I mean, that's an interesting development, right? I think we'll go at the first, Bitcoin second, really create this Bitcoin gold comparison, and that's when majority of people start realize, yeah, Bitcoin is way better than gold. It's fixed supply, right? It's permissionless, and you can send it everywhere you want via internet, via your phone, right? Gold, you cannot do that. So there will be more innovation happening on Bitcoin than gold. There will be no technological revolution on gold, no matter how you do it, right? You can put it on blockchain, but doesn't really scale, right? Bitcoin, on the other hand, you can put that into devices, internet, into AI, into all sorts of like transaction, banking system, more innovation, right? Just more innovation compared to gold. So that would be more, that would be explosive. So that when we will enter into the conversation that, Bitcoin just better than gold, and eventually taking over. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the only technology innovation revolving around gold will be negative to gold, because it would probably be some sort of like new mining equipment that comes out, or like new scientific discovery that enables us to find more gold at the bottom of the ocean or somewhere else around the world that we haven't been able to in the past. So it's like you're kind of betting against innovation if you're holding gold to some extent.
Exactly. Right. In the past, like 5,000 years ago, people struggle to mine gold. Now it's like you can go to the space, potentially to mine gold. So yeah, if you're betting on gold, you're betting on technological, decrease, or you don't want it to be too high tech, right? You want to be very boring. You want to be stagnant. Versus like Bitcoin, you really want the whole industry to accelerate, innovate, right? So this thing become more scarce. This thing become more valuable over time, and actually makes sense, right? You see the ASIC miner, the chip in the ASIC is just doubling the efficiency every year, and Bitcoin, the entire network security benefits from that, right? So Bitcoin does live out of technology revolution advancement. And I think that's a good thing. That's just separate the boring asset like that gold versus like more exciting, more technological advanced asset like Bitcoin. And I think people is going to eventually see this, and young guys like you and me, why would you own gold, right? Because there's less opportunity in gold. Gold have been saturated for thousands of years, right?
Yep.
The last time the gold has like a really interesting tech revolution is probably the Spider ETF.
Yeah.
Coming up, right? And that's it. And I don't think you can create much of the utility for gold if you put it on a blockchain, right? And the future, of our humanity, like if it's evolving in AI cannot use gold. AI can only use digital, currency, digital native, right? So Bitcoin's the only option. And yeah, like you say, it is just like gold is against technology revolution. Bitcoin is for technology revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Louis, it is kind of getting late here in the United States. So this has been an awesome conversation. Do you have any closing thoughts on, the future of Bitcoin and maybe where the audience can go learn more about you?
Yeah, so you guys can follow me on my X account, Louis Liu. You can follow the medbusinesscapital.com for past research. You will find some work that Joe had done before. Um, yeah, and I mean my last word will be, you better get some Bitcoin before the price run away. I think right now Bitcoin is at pretty cheap valuation, and with all the things that's developing right now geopolitically, United States adopt Bitcoin strategy reserve, and all the companies around the world are trying to buy Bitcoin. Right, the supply is going to run out pretty fast. So get some Bitcoin before the price is too expensive for you to really get a significant stack. So that's the my last word.
Yeah, you better get some before it catches on, and it looks like it's starting to catch on. Well, thanks everybody.